Okay, are you ready, people? Daniel, you ready? Shota, you ready? Yoya? Andre?
Yeah.
Sovi? Ben, you ready? All right. Here we go. Okay. Good morning, all. Welcome to Monday morning. I hope a good weekend was had by all. Good weekend, Andre? Yeah? Do anything?
Not
What's up?
really.
Not really? That's okay. That's what weekends are for. They're for doing nothing. Sophie, do anything? Not really? That's okay. That's cool. Anybody else? Shota? Yoya? Not really. Daniel, anything fun this weekend? No fun? Oof. Okay. So, I'll just remind you one more thing. In class, we've got to keep our masks on. That is the health directive. I know it is annoying and hot. Not hot in the good way, but hot in the like, oh, I'm dying in here. But yeah, we got to do it still. Okay. So let's see. So Michelle is here. Good morning. And Unadi is here. Good morning to you. Hello. And let's jump in. So on Friday we were talking about what was going on in Germany in the 20s, right? And so we said in the U.S. it was a bit of a wild party. There was lots of production and money and booze and fashion and consumer electronics, and it's quite an exciting time. And in Germany, there's some truth to that as well, right? So there is some partying and drinking going on, but Germany is having a much tougher time in this sort of post-World War I period than the U.S. is. And why might that be? Why are things in Germany not as great as they are in the U.S.?
I think because Germany, they lost the war. They had, that moment was for them to be good, not like war that they had to stay.
Right. So Germany's just been fighting a war, and they need time to sort of regroup and reorganize. The U.S. is kind of in a different place, right? They're able to, they're able to kind of transition a little more quickly into, back to regular life. Germany, it's more tough, right? What are some of the struggles that Germany is having in this period? What are some of the struggles that Germany is having? If you look back at your textbook pages here, that may give you a hint or two. Why was Germany kind of struggling? We could probably say that a lot of Germany's struggles are financial or economic in nature. Why might that be? Okay, what about the treaty? What's that? The fines, right? The reparations. The fact that Germany had to pay a bunch of money back to the Allies, right? And that's there's some big dollar values there, right? It's billions of dollars that Germany has to repay, right? Do you think they just have that sitting around in their bank account? No, why not? Half the industry got cut? In what way? Yeah. So parts of Germany that were very industrial productive or industrially productive, they've been returned to France, right? What has Germany just spent the last 4 years doing? War, right? War is expensive. You've got to build all sorts of bombs and planes and things like that, right? So they've spent all their money on the war. They've, had some of their industrially productive areas given back to France. They've got this big bill to pay. That's not helpful, right? What else is going on? Or what else is hurting their ability to, or hurting their finances? In what way, politics? You're correct, but has to do with markets, right? Conflict. What do you mean? Okay, so the government is kind of not functioning very well, right? Right. So there's a lot of disagreement and sort of what's a good word? Partisanship, factionalization. Both of those are pretty fancy words. And there's a couple of overthrows, right? A couple of coups that happen too. The communists try to overthrow the government. People on the right wing try to overthrow the government. That's not great, right? Germany's trying to sell its products on the world market, but what are they finding?
Civil
Where?
war.
Well, they're not quite.
An actual civil war, but it sounds like the start of a civil war.
There's a lot of political unrest, right? There's a lot of political unrest. There's martial law. What do we say martial law was?
When the army took over.
Right, when the army takes over, right? If you look at, I think Ben, you mentioned Myanmar on Thursday. Yeah, that's martial law. The military comes in and establishes order, right? For good or bad. So Germany's trying to sell its goods on the world market, but of course people don't want to buy German things because they've just spent the last 4 years fighting against the Germans, right? They don't want to buy German products. Germans are the enemy, right? So Germany's trying to sell its stuff, but a lot of countries don't want to buy it, right? So that's a problem. So they've got problems, right? And again, it's not dark and dreary for everybody, but for some it is, right? Unemployment is super high. There's governmental unrest. People are under martial law. They have an inflation problem. What's inflation? What about the money? It got inflated. Okay.
I don't know how to explain it for me.
Oh, okay. It got inflated. So prices start to rise and rise, right? And it means that basically money is worth less and less, right? Their currency at one point, their Deutschmarks become so weak, so worthless. People are burning it in their furnaces because it's cheaper than firewood, It's cheaper to actually burn their paper money. Yeah. You what's that? It's possible that they may have, and that's often
Yeah,
some.
they did to try and pay off the treaty. They had
Oh,
to fine.
right,
In doing so, they lost the monetary value.
right. Yeah, because you can't just print more money, right? It doesn't work that way.
I wish you could.
Yeah, I know, right? But yeah, it doesn't work that way. You can't just print more. And so, who was it? Was it Uganda that they had a similar crisis, and so their president just started printing money, and eventually, like the value of the currency.
Oh, Zimbabwe.
Is it Zimbabwe? Yeah, where the value of the currency dropped so far that they actually issued $1 trillion bill. Yeah. So, and I,
Almost happened to Indonesia as well.
yeah.
I think $100 was about 150,000 rupiah.
Wow.
And there's like I think there's like a $500,000 bill as well.
Yeah. It happened to Russia, just at the end of the Soviet Union when they just became Russia. Their currency dropped and they cut 2 zeros off the end of the ruble. And so yeah, lots of countries have had inflationary or currency devaluation, but Germany suffers through it here as well. So it's pretty rough going. Lots of people are unhappy. People are trying to overthrow the government. People feel they've been stabbed in the back, right, by the Weimar government. They've been forced to accept responsibility for World War I. Of course, it's not their fault, but they were made to be responsible. They got to pay everybody back. They don't have any money to pay. Pretty crappy, right? That's not a fun time. So that, of course, leads us to this guy. What do we say about this guy? Okay, so let's throw out some words that might describe him. Genius might be one of them. Charismatic. What else? The people's people. What?
The people's choice.
The people's choice. Okay. What else do we know about this guy?
No one Nobel Peace Prize.
He won a Nobel Peace Prize. I think that was.
Did he?
I think that was Stalin, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it was that.
What else do we know about him?
He fought the Nazis.
Formed the Nazis. Who are the Nazis? Activists? What?
Soldiers.
Soldiers, okay. What else do we know about this guy?
Responsible for the Second World War.
He is responsible for the Second World War. Yeah, if World War I wasn't Germany's fault, I think it's fair to say that World War II probably was. What else do we know about him? What kind of person do you think he was?
Smart.
Smart? Okay. What's that? An artist?
If only they kept him in high school.
If only, right? What else do you know about him? As a person, what do you think he was like?
Patriotic.
Hugely patriotic, right? Nationalistic even, right?
To make Germany great again.
He wanted to make Germany great again. Indeed, he did, right? He definitely wanted that. What else? What do you think it would have been like to like have a beer with this guy? What do you think he would have been like as a person?
That one guy that talks about politics all the time, I just want to get out of the bar.
Okay, the one guy who won't shut up about politics. You just want to like run away from him.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know he spoke well, though. He spoke really well.
Yes, definitely an excellent public speaker, right? So put him in front of a crowd, and he knows what he's doing, right? it's probably fair to say that a lot of when people think of history in the 20th century, a lot of what they think about is him, right? He really comes to mind pretty quickly. And it's interesting because
Wasn't it the
he kind of he appears in he first appears kind of in the 1920s. I'll show you that in a second. So he yeah, he's really in the spotlight in the late 30s and of course in World War II, but he's been around for quite some time before that happens. Why do you think we pay so much attention to him? Why do you think people compare so many things and people to Hitler and the Nazis? Why don't we talk about Mussolini ever? Nobody.
almost accomplished what he wanted to do?
He almost accomplished what he wanted to do, which was
Just to all Jews,
what's that?
killing the Jews.
Yeah, he wanted to eradicate Jewish people in German-held Europe, and
Came very close.
he was very successful in that goal, right? Why else do we still talk about him though? Why are people so interested in him?
He's one of a kind.
Is he though?
Yeah. But he did back up his call.
He did. He did. He had a lot of opinions on things, but he did follow through on them. Okay. Obviously, we know some things about him, but there's also probably some things that we do not, right? And so I think to understand what happens in Germany, we have to understand who he is and what he does, right? History is not, we don't want history to be just, a bunch of names and facts and, big people, but it's really hard to ignore him, right? He just has such a big impact on what happens that he cannot be ignored, right? In the same way Mussolini can be ignored, because Mussolini has a part to play, certainly if you're looking at Italian history, but in terms of European history or world history, Mussolini's just not that big of a deal, right? But it's really difficult to avoid talking about Adolf Hitler, right? Very difficult to avoid. So, that said, let's dig into this a little bit. Again, he's still discussed today, 75 years later, right? And so let's learn a little bit about this guy, okay? So I have a short documentary to show you. It has, it'll tell us a little bit about what he did, but it'll also tell us a little bit about who he was, okay? The documentary that we're going to watch, is it a primary source or a secondary source? Even though you haven't watched it yet. Secondary source, right? What do we know about secondary sources? What?
It's not from the actual source.
Right? It's not from the actual time period, but it is built with references which are often primary sources, right? So we'll see some footage, some video footage, we'll see some pictures, we'll hear some words, we'll hear some things that Hitler wrote. We'll see him speaking, and we'll have recordings of him speaking, right? So we have a bunch of primary sources that are stitched together into a secondary source that's there to kind of try to paint a picture of who this guy was, right? So as you can see, I have a bunch of questions for you here. There are quite a lot of questions, I realize. Some of them are very easy to answer, though. Some of them just have single word answers or very short answers, so don't panic about it. The questions are in Microsoft Teams. As for online people, the video is in Microsoft Teams as well. So if you're online and you go to the Files section, you'll see... Actually, no, you won't see anything because I haven't uploaded it yet. But I will upload it this moment here. I will upload it right now so that in a second or two you will see it appear. Yeah. Before we start watching, is there anything else that we should say about Hitler or ask questions we should ask about him? Or things that we don't know about him?
Does he explain his mustache in the documentary?
Does he explain his mustache in the documentary?
Did he like not grow a full one, or he just liked it?
Well, A, nothing explains that mustache. B, he does not explain it. But I'd be very interested in hearing your theories about what that was about.
How did he die?
How did he die? Does anyone know?
There are so many theories.
There are what?
There are many theories.
There are many theories.
Yeah, so I just want to know the real one.
He killed himself because he didn't want to die at the hands of America and the others.
Well, that's the official story, right? Is that he will, when the Russians are entering Berlin, he will kill himself because it's basically all over at that point. But there are other theories out there. I may have some evidence for you, though, Andre, that you may find interesting a little bit later. Anything else? Okay. So online people, again, the video is just uploading. It'll just take a minute or two to get there, and then you can watch. We're going to watch the first 25 minutes, and then we're going to take a break, okay? So questions are in Microsoft Teams. Those ones right there. We'll watch the video for 25 minutes, and then we'll take a break, okay? So so we'll see you guys after the break, okay? And I'll keep an eye on this just to make sure that this thing uploads correctly. Okay, see you in a bit there, online people. Good luck. Okay, and we are back. At least I think so. Andre, are you back with me? Okay. So, the first part of this documentary is kind of interesting because we hear about Hitler from himself, right? We hear a primary source. Obviously, the narrator is reading things that he's written, but Hitler is kind of telling us about himself. And what does Hitler? How does Hitler describe himself as a younger boy in school?
He only learned what he wanted to.
Yeah, the things that he wanted to learn, he just kind of learned them like that. What about the things he didn't like? Yeah, he didn't care. What did he say? He said he
Sabotaged it.
yeah, he sabotaged. What a badass, right? Yeah,
Such a
think
cool guy.
yeah, I know, right? He just learned, whatever he wanted without trying, and then if he didn't like it, he just, sabotaged it, right? The bad boy. What else did he say about himself?
Selective memory.
That was the narrator saying that, but it seemed like he did have a selective memory, or at least that was the narrator's opinion. What else? What else did Hitler say about himself? He said something like he was a bit of a ringleader, right? He had this
Oh yeah.
gang of kids, and like he was in charge,
Naturally gifted.
naturally gifted, right? So he's kind of painting a picture for us here. But again, what should we remember about primary sources?
Biased.
They have what's one of the things that determines the bias?
The subject.
Yes, the subject, but also the
Audience.
the audience. Who's the audience here?
For the documentary.
No. Well, for Hitler's original words.
Germans.
Yeah. And how does he want Germans to think of him?
Eligible.
Yeah. Someone who's a leader, someone who is what else?
Patriotic.
Patriotic. Someone who's like tough, right? Someone who's intelligent, someone who can lead the people and won't be pushed around, right? Even in school, right? His teachers were probably giving him detention and giving him a hard time. But did little Hitler care? No, he was too cool for that, right? He was too busy getting straight A's in geography and history while sabotaging other things, running around with his little gang of boys and probably, pushing kids into the mud and things like that, right? He was a little badass, right? That's what he's trying to tell people. Do you think that was true?
Yeah.
Might have been, right? The documentary says, and it is documented, it turns out he was kind of an average student, right? Like he says, oh yeah, I got the best marks and then I didn't care. And actually it turns out he was just kind of pretty average, maybe below average in terms of his grades, right? I'm not sure if we should believe the way he characterizes himself, because again, he's got an audience, right? And he wants Germany to see him as the strong guy, right? The heroic guy, the leader, right? He doesn't want to say, oh, well, I was okay in school and, I got okay marks and I didn't have a lot of friends and, that's boring, right? Nobody wants to hear that. They want to hear what a badass Hitler was. So what's his story, right? He starts out, he's born into this family. His mom has unfortunately lost her 3 prior children, which again was pretty common in those days. Infant mortality was quite a bit higher than it is in Germany today. And so it's not shocking that, she lost a few children before him. But how does she treat him when he's born? And what's that?
A lot of care.
Yeah, a lot of care, right? She dotes over him, right? We might even say she kind of spoils him a little bit. What's his dad like?
Strict.
Yeah, they say he's strict. What else do we know about him?
Wanted him to be working for the government.
Yeah, he wanted him to be working for the government, like he did, right? What else do we know about his dad?
But the guy didn't want Hitler to be like more powerful than him, I guess. Right?
Kind of, right? What was the quote from his father that Hitler was so opposed to? What did, what did he say? Hitler said, "Dad, just think." And his father said, "I don't need to think, son. I work for the government," right? So, what do you think what was Hitler kind of pushing back against? Young teenage Hitler.
His father, the ideology,
His father's ideology, right? It's kind of a passive feeling, right? It's like, yeah, I don't need to think about anything. I don't need to, stick to my convictions or whatever. I just do what I'm told, right? That's my job. I just do what the government tells me to do. That's what it is, right? And Hitler's like, no, that's not good enough, right? I want to be able to do what I want. I don't want to just listen to other people and do what they tell me to, which I think is a very kind of, I think that's kind of a common feeling at that age, but you forgot the most important detail, by the way. His father had an epic mustache. You see that thing?
oh, right.
It was like going like down the sides of his face and
Yeah.
crazy, right? What kind of techniques was Hitler using in these early political debates? He's got a few sneaky tricks.
Their tactics.
Scare tactics? How so?
They can have the communist thinking, sending in spies.
Yeah.
To start riots.
Yeah, so that's kind of an underhanded trick, right? So the Communist Party is having a meeting, and what does Hitler do? He sends some of his Nazi guys over in disguise, right? They sneak into the meeting, and then partway through, they start attacking people and beating them up, right? The whole meeting dissolves, and Communist Party can't meet, right? It's kind of a jerky thing to do, but it's not the most jerky thing he'll ever do. What else does he do? Political debates. What other tactics does he have? Maybe in his own meetings. Did you hear what he said?
I'm trying to remember.
Yeah. What did he say that he did? He was at a meeting and Hitler was trying to make a point about something. I don't know. He would get one of his people to be in the audience just in regular clothes. And so Hitler would be saying, "We have to do something about this." And then it would look like some random person stood up and said, "He's right. That's what we should do." Right? So he like plants people in the audience to support him and to say the thing he wants them to say at the right time. Right? Sneaky. Very sneaky. But it looks good. Right? It looks good when you're arguing for something and then people suddenly stand up and say, "He's right, we should all do that."
Then other people start coming around.
Yeah. Yeah, he's very shrewd, right? He knows how to sort of manipulate or to work a crowd. What does Hitler think the nation should be? This is a bit of a reading between the lines thing. But powerful, yeah. What does he want from the German nation? Powerful?
Control.
Yeah,
Power control.
Yeah, he wants them to be, he wants Germany to be in control of its own destiny. Do you think Germany feels like it's totally under the thumb of other nations at this point?
Yeah.
Yeah, right? Because the Treaty of Versailles basically just told them how it was, right? They didn't negotiate it. It was like, here, this is your life for the next 10 years. Sign here. Right? Germany didn't get any say, right? They didn't have any power. And Hitler's like, no, that's not what Germany is. Germany is proud, right? Germany is strong. Germany doesn't listen to anyone else, right? And so, yeah, you want to impose conditions on Germany? Just wait till you see the conditions I impose on you, right? So he's kind of reacting to what's happened to his country and probably a little bit about what's happened to himself, right? I suspect it's not all about the country for him. I suspect he's got a bit of a personal ego component to what's going on here too. What happens at the Munich Putsch? Funny word. What happens?
Is that why he got arrested?
Yeah. Why does he get arrested?
His message is something.
Public nudity. No. What does he try to do? He and his followers.
Start a riot or something?
It's a little more than that. It's a little more than that. What does he do? What's he get arrested for? No? Yeah, he and his followers actually try to overthrow the Bavarian government. Right? It's the Munich Putsch. Sometimes it's called the beer hall putsch because I think they figure out this plan in a beer hall. As a tip, if you're ever going to overthrow the government, don't create a plan while you're drinking beer. It's probably a bad idea. But anyway, it fails, right? A bunch of guys get shot, a bunch of Nazi party members get shot. Hitler goes to jail, right? While he's there, he writes that book Mein Kampf, right? My Struggle is what it's called. Has anyone ever read any of it?
Only a few extracts.
What was your kind of take on it?
Yeah, from what I read, he personalized a lot of things. He made problems that weren't his.
Yeah, he did, right? Yeah, he took things that were, Germany's problems and he kind of personalized them. He made them his own. That is true.
It was revolutionary for him as well. Like, I think 11 months in prison with it. Completely changed his mindset of how to get things done.
Yeah, he had a lot of time to think about those things, right?
I mean, obviously it worked after he changed.
Yeah. Well, the other thing that's interesting too, and on that point, is that again, this is why we have to think carefully about primary sources, because people can go back and kind of rewrite their own history, right? From the documentary, why was young Hitler? Why was he in Vienna? Why did he go to Vienna?
Art school.
Yeah, he went to apply to art school, right? He sent in an art school application. We saw some of his drawings. I think they were pretty good. They're better than what I could have done. But he applies to art school. He gets rejected. But then in the documentary, it said that Hitler said that I went to Vienna to observe the social question and the race question and the what was the third question? The political question? I don't know. He had 3 questions. And when he went to Vienna to address those, and then he figured them out, and when he left Vienna, he knew everything he needed to know, right? So he made it sound as if he went there to learn about the nation, right? But
He went there and got pissed off.
what's that?
He went there and got pissed off.
Yeah, he went there and was unsuccessful and had a few years of just like bumming around, being forced to earn a living. How terrible, right? Join the club, Hitler. We all are going to be forced to earn a living. But he made it sound like he went there to learn these things about Germany, when really he didn't go there for that at all, right? What do they say here? What's the Nazis' purpose in Parliament? What does he say about that? He's talking about the Nazis as a parliamentary party.
A democratic way of seizing control.
Yeah, right.
His main goal.
Because he tries to gain power by overthrowing the government, right? He tries to overthrow it with violence.
It didn't work.
Doesn't work.
It went the proper way.
Yeah, so now he's like, okay, we're gonna hold our noses because it stinks, right? We're gonna hold our noses and we're going to enter power the democratic way, right? But he says we're not a democratic party. We're not a parliamentary party. This is a means to an end, right? Once we achieve a majority, then we'll have Germany, right? There's no freedom of the people or voting or any of that crap. We will take control, right? And so maybe I should ask you this later, but I'll ask you now. Should anyone have been surprised what Hitler did? That he seized total power? No, he was talking about it the whole time, right? It wasn't a secret agenda. It wasn't a conspiracy theory. He said all along what he was.
He just made it sound really good.
Yeah, he told us what he was going to do, and then he did it, right? We shouldn't be shocked, or at least Germany shouldn't have been shocked. So he says we're going to hold our noses and we're going to, to be voted in. And that way, when we gain power, at least if we can't outshoot them, we'll outvote them. And then, at least they'll have to accept our success, right? And again, it works. You heard some of the numbers there where the Nazi Party is becoming more and more popular in Germany, right? So it's also important to remember that the people put him into power, right? He doesn't seize it. He tries. He doesn't seize it. The people give it to him, and he convinces them to, right? With his words, which is another thing they point out. So I think that's important to remember, right? That yes, he becomes a dictator, and yes, he has the strength of the army behind him, but that's not how he comes to power, right? He comes to power by democratic means. He gets himself and his party elected, right? That's where that, this fascism comes out of democracy, right? So it's important to remember that. Okay, so we saw in the movie there, or we saw in the film that von Hindenburg appointed Hitler as chancellor, but then Hindenburg died. And what did Hitler do after that?
Make himself feel
Right, he took two positions
might have been.
and made them into one, right? Why do you think you might have two positions like that? Why might you have a chancellor and a president? President. Why do you think you would have two?
One sort of an advisor in a sense.
Yeah,
He didn't want any other opinion.
certainly.
He wanted to do what he wanted to do.
Certainly, right? So there might be an advisory capacity, and Hitler is not interested in listening to anyone else because he knows.
What he wanted.
Yeah, he knows everything he needs to know already. Why else might you have two people at that level of power?
2 heads are better than one.
Maybe two heads are better than one, but also it's kind of it's a check, right, on power. Yeah, if you just have one guy in charge and there's no check on his power, that's a problem, right? And so Germany has two that kind of balance each other out, right? They have different powers. And so one person can't do too much. But of course, Hitler wants to do too much. And so he combines those two positions into one. And now there's no president, There's no chancellor, there's just Führer, right? There's just the leader.
Do they still use that in Germany?
Oh no, no. Angela Merkel is currently the chancellor of Germany. I assume they have a president as well, but I'm not. Don't quote me on that.
Chancellor is like kind of like a prime minister.
What's that?
Chancellor is kind of like a prime what a prime minister would do.
I think how it works is, I think when you have two, like when you have a chancellor or a president or something like that, one is the head of the government and the other is the head of the state. And so they have kind of slightly different responsibilities. But I'm not exactly sure how it works because it works differently in different places, and I'm less familiar because Canada doesn't really work.
What does Canada have?
We have a prime minister who's the head of the government. The head of the state is kind of the queen, but in her place we have a governor general, and the governor general has a very limited role. So they're kind of they're almost like a placeholder for the queen's powers. They barely do anything. So it's almost all the prime minister. It's almost all
You just
Justin.
sit there and get the big check, right?
What's that?
You just sit there and get the big check.
More or less. Yes. So if anyone ever offers you the governor general job, take it. It's a sweet deal. You'll barely do any work. They'll give you a big fancy house to live in. They might ask you to do something once every 4 years.
Just a sign if you do.
Yeah, take it. Yeah, you'll have to do a lot of signing because every law that gets passed needs royal assent. So you will. Yeah, so you will have to sign it, but if anyone ever offers you governor general, take it. Okie dokie, where are we here? Oh, now we talk about the role of women, and so now we get to the real. Now they spill the real tea here. Hitler and his relationships with people. Okay, so far what we've seen is a lot of his public persona, right? Who he was as a political leader. But now we'll see a little bit about who he is as a person, right? If you like went to a party and he was there, right? So what's that?
It was a lone wolf.
He was a
Alone.
yeah, that comes up a lot of times.
Yeah,
The-
like the war. He
Yeah.
didn't have any friends.
Yeah, it must have been a tough war with no friends, right?
Yeah.
Tough thing to go through with no.
I think it's tough, and all we talk about is the hatred towards the Jews.
Well, yeah, right. He doesn't sound like he'd be very enjoyable to be around, right?
Yeah.
Sounds like he's pretty moody. Sounds like he rants a lot about things, complains, talks about the Marxists and the communists and the Jews and foreigners, and yeah, he doesn't sound like a lot of fun, right? He sounds like he's pretty cranky a lot of the time, right? And you know, it's hard to be around people who are always right? Yeah. Okay. Let me see here. The role of the Hitler Youth, propaganda, Lebensraum. Okay. So, let's watch the other part of this, and then if we have some time at the end, we will discuss it. Okay? So, we'll go back to the video here. I think we stopped watching at 1924. That's where we are. So I'm just going to put this in the live chat here. That's where we stopped. So we're going to start there again. Okay. Okay. So, some fairly ridiculous statements from Mr. Hitler here. What do we hear about his attitude towards women?
Women should just stay at home and take care of the kids.
Basically, that's what we're hearing, right? What does he say exactly? Like about women's purpose?
Only the basics.
Yeah, right. He says, you know, it's good for a woman to have children, there because then she has a reason to exist, right? Yikes! How sexist is that on a scale of 1 to 100? 101, right? But do you think that was kind of in line with the way most people thought at the time?
Yeah.
Yeah, it probably was, right? So it's kind of worth, you know, it's worth kind of saying, oh my gosh, that's super sexist. But also, it's
It was
pretty,
normal back then.
yeah, that was normal, right? That's not out of step with probably the way that a lot of men felt in, you know, 1920 something, right? What else do we hear about him and talking about propaganda? What is propaganda?
It's things to especially to make people think a certain way.
Yeah,
Force a certain view out of people.
yeah, it's
Like fake news.
yeah, it's the government kind of convincing people of things that they want them to believe, right? And so, yeah, sometimes it contains a grain of truth, sometimes it contains a grain of not truth, right? But it's the government trying to convince the people of something that is useful for the government, right? And Hitler, of course, is very good at that, both at home and with other countries, right? What do we see about him when he interacts with the leaders of other countries?
Tells them what they want to do.
Which is,
They're adhering to the rules and stuff.
yeah, right? So the leaders of Europe fear a German sort of revival, right? Germany got strong in the early 1900s. They went to war, they tried to take over all of Europe. The Allies were able to stop them. In the Treaty of Versailles, they tried to sort of cripple them and make sure that they couldn't dominate Europe again. And here they see that Germany is getting stronger again, right? Everyone gets a little nervous, and what does Adolf Hitler tell them? Oh, what's that?
Forget about it.
Forget about it. It's okay. We're just working to rebuild our shattered nation, right? Everything is peaceful here. We take care of human rights. No group is persecuted. You know, I'm not forcing anything on anyone. We're all good, right? Right? But of course we know better, right? We know that that's just a bunch of propaganda BS, right? There's nothing truthful about that. But of course, he has no problem telling people really whatever they want to hear or whatever suits his purpose, right? He doesn't mind lying. He'll do whatever he needs to, right? What's the purpose of the Hitler Youth? We saw those. It's like the Boy Scouts from hell. But what do we see? What do we see with them?
Loyal supporters. Because it was instilled into them when they were young, so it's all in them.
Yeah, right.
That's what he wanted.
Yeah, Hitler's very kind of shrewd in that, you know, kids are easy to brainwash, right? They don't know anything else.
Baby Nazis.
Yeah, and so it's very easy to convince them of whatever you want to convince them of. And once they're convinced, they will
It's set in stone.
they will follow through. It's set in stone, right? He knows that kids are very easy to manipulate, and so yeah, he creates these youth. Also note that it's not the German youth, it's the Hitler youth, right?
Mm.
They're modeled on him. They're not modeled on Germany. Interesting, right? I don't know. Do you think he's a really smart guy?
Yeah.
You think so? I don't know. I go back and forth. You know, is he a smart?
His rise to power was kind of slow.
Well, and it took a long time, right?
Years,
It took a long time. Let me see. I think he joins the German Workers' Party in 1923 or 24, maybe 23, and it takes him until 33 to gain absolute power. So it's 10 years, which actually isn't that long, but must have seemed like a long time,
Yeah.
right? It's a lot of work to get to where he did.
He's a patient guy.
He's a patient guy. He does a lot of things right. If you want to gain power, you know, does a lot of things right, and I don't know.
He made a lot of mistakes over the most time.
Definitely. He's a much better. Well, yeah, he was much better at gaining power than he was at doing anything else after the war began. But I don't know. Interesting to think about. Okay, people. That's all the time we have. Pack it up, come back tomorrow. We'll finish this video and we'll go on with, you know, the transition into World War II, okay? All right. That is all. I will see you tomorrow.